Okay, so every object, or every well, no, every object, you know, has its points, of course. You know, so we go in here and I have this bowl. Okay, well, on top of that, what you have is sort of an underlying coordinate structure. Okay, called UVs. Okay, and UVs are just a way, like I was just saying, to tell the computer, or you know, how you want a texture stuck on there, because you know, as you know, our objects are three-dimensional and textures are two-dimensional. You know, so you know, this is a two-dimensional map. It's got to be flat, so you can paint it or whatever in Photoshop, or make it, you know, however you'd like to make it. Okay, so if I isolate this bowl, okay, and I turn on, so there's two ways to get about this, or go about this. There's a whole UV editing workspace that you can get at, that sort of just puts the tools in front of you, and you can also just get at it right here. Like if I wanted to stay in my editing area, I can just open the UV editor. Okay, but that doesn't give me sort of a view that you need, so that you can visualize this. So I'm going to go back over to UV editing. So what this is showing me is here's my object, and then here's the UVs for it. Okay, and what that means is for every polygon in the object, there's a corresponding UV dot in here somewhere. So if I right click and I get my context menu to get at, you know, edges and faces and verts and everything, but you know, one of the ones is UVs, and I'm sure you've all seen this and run into it. So if I click here, if you look somewhere on the object, oops, somewhere here on the object, there'll be a corresponding, so there it is. So this dot right there corresponds with this dot on this map. Okay, now if I select maybe a bunch of them in a row, you'll start to get an idea of where they are. Okay, so that's that line that runs this way. Okay, so you can do it in both directions. I can select on the UV to see where they fall, or I can do it on the object and see where they fall there. Okay, so these would be ones that run around this rim, right? So you can see that, like I said, that essentially these UVs up and down are around this direction. Okay, and the ones that run this way run sort of laterally through the bowl. Okay, so I'll back up and I'll show you. So if I go in here and I create a cube, okay, the good news is that by default it creates UVs for you for primitives. Okay, so same thing. If I go in here and I select select a few of them, you'll see where they map on the object. So okay, so that's those. If I'm doing it again, I select all those. So these are all up here. These are all the ones that correspond to this down here, to these faces. Okay, so if I come in to the UV editor and I select right here, checker map, it's gonna put basically a temporary texture on the object so that you can see what's mapped to where and how it's working. Okay, so like I said, if I select these guys, you'll see they correspond right to where these two zeros are. Okay, now you can move these just like any other vertice, right? They're kind of hard to see, so I'm going to turn it off for a second. Well, I can't see the effect then. Let's see. Okay, there we go. So so the first one shows it here in the UV map editor, and the other one shows it in the viewport, right? So you'll see if I grab one of these and I hit W on my keyboard and I'm in move mode, I can move that, and you can see how it's applying it to the object now. Okay, so let's see. So if I move it this way, I start to move into where that one is, and if I keep going out, it's going to smush all that in there, or smush everything from here to there to the next vertice. All this gets smushed into this space between these two. Okay, so I'm going to put that back. Okay, So, oops. There it goes. Okay. So, you know, when it maps onto this box, all you'd have to do to make a, properly map this, meaning like, you know, put box art on this or something, like if you were gonna, you know, paint this like the Jack in the Box or something like that, and you wanted to paint all the sides, all you have to do is you know, basically figure out which ones are which, you know, because they're going to be in squares. So it's like, okay, this is a side, this is the front, and then this is a side. Okay, so like I said, if you went in here and you painted, you know, whatever you want on here, now you can't, you know, this is not something you're going to do in Maya, but if you go over to Photoshop, you would know that, you know, this is one face, this is another face. Okay, and this would probably wraps around, that's the top, and then this goes around to the other side, and then this wraps around to the bottom. So that's the bottom. So you can just, I mean, you just think of it like an unfolded box, you know, I mean, because essentially that's exactly what it is. It's like when you buy a box from, you know, the UPS store or something like that, you know, and you have to put it together yourself. It's the same concept, okay? So the good news is all your primitives come in that way. The problem with that, though, is that when you start modifying them, the UVs aren't taken care of for you, okay? So if I go to a cylinder, you'll see what it does with a cylinder. Okay, same idea. If I come here, over here, so it's ripped off the top and the bottom, or which one's which here? Okay, so that's the top. This is the side, and then this is the bottom. And like I said, the good news is that these things stay, you know, if this is how you're going to use it, then you're all set, okay? And it's a good starting point, meaning like whenever you use one of the two-dimensional textures that are created in Hypershade, it has clues on how to attach that to the object, right? Because there's something there, because there's nothing stopping you from having no UVs whatsoever, right? So I just deleted them, and when I put something on there, it wouldn't know what to do with the texture whatsoever. So the UVs that are created are at least a start, you know, to map things on there. So okay, so like I said, all of your primitives come that way. They show up with things already on, with UVs already on them. Okay, so you can think of a UV and the way that they get put on an object when we have to put them on ourselves is either, I mean, is essentially a projection, because that's exactly what it is. And that if I, like you saw, when I moved this, it changed. Oops, wrong object. There we go. So when I move my UVs, you see what it does to it. And the problem is that, like right here, if I was trying to make this, if I was trying to put, you know, circular art right on the top here, if you don't get this right, you see how I'm distorting it over here in the corner just by moving it, okay? So, you know, getting UVs right, especially in an object that's, you know, not organic, or, you know, is, you know, something you're trying to get exact, it's really important to get them laid out correctly, and I'll show you how we do that, okay? So I made some other objects for some cases here. Oop. There it goes. So I'm gonna delete this crap. So, ooh. So what I made is just a few different, I just made this little table, right? So this is the same set we were using before, and a couple of lights. So when I did this revolution, oh no, I want to start out with the box. Okay, so the box here, as you just saw, you know, has its own. So if I was making a box of cereal here, okay, I have my UVs already laid out, and I could go in and put the art in properly, right? So one thing that you might notice though is, you notice how these are stretched. You see this? So UVs, like, you know, if I move the vertex objects, sorry, the vertex of an object, it doesn't affect the UVs underneath. Okay, so I can move these all I want. So let me grab a few of them. and they stick with it like a sticker, you know, as you might imagine. But the opposite isn't true. So if I move it, no, the opposite is true also, sorry. Meaning, like, if I move a UV, the object doesn't move. So they're related to each other, but they're not the same. So, you know, it's easy to sort of get confused of, like, you know, I'm seeing blue and I'm seeing a wireframe and all that stuff. Why am I not moving the object here? You know, these are just for relationships of between a two-dimensional texture map that we see here and the object and its vertices and its faces and everything, okay? And there's a couple of ways to select UVs. You have both UVs and then you have UV shells, and a UV shell is any set of UVs that are connected to each other. So when an object's broken into pieces, it's basically like selecting the whole chunk at once, okay? And a UV is like, you know, just selecting the individual faces, okay? So what I was pointing out here is, if you go in here and you select the object, you'll see how distorted this stuff is, okay? So sometimes you want to fix this, because if you go in here and if I brought a flattened version of this over into Photoshop, I would have to stretch my art to make that work, because if you see over here, this is my art where everything is, you know, if I wanted to put something that's square, like if I put a circle on here, you know, meaning an O, like, you know, like I said, if this was a cereal box, okay, those circles would all be stretched like that. So you can fix that by just, you know, so you see here, because they can, just like everything else, they can be rotated and stretched. So if I stretch that out, or actually go more like this way, you'll see I'm starting to head more towards square pieces, okay? So now if I went in here and I found my faces that make up the box face, that's going to be, okay, so that's this stuff right here, okay? Now I know this is where the front of the box is, and it's, you know, nice and square, okay? Whereas the sides are stretched. So actually those are probably those guys. So if I grabbed all the stuff through the middle here, and got rid of some of this. Yeah, see, so if I squish that in, you get that. So, okay. So that is the box type projection, meaning you have a bunch of different ways that you can project. Like if I'm gonna start over, in fact, that's what I'll do here, is I'm gonna start over with this box. I'm gonna delete its automatic UVs and I'm gonna do them myself, okay? So if I go like so, and I delete these guys, so now I have an object, no texture whatsoever, okay? I'm gonna start over from scratch. So what you have is, and they're actually available up here, even in polygon moding. That's polygon mode. That's these end guys right here, okay? And you've got access to a few different ones, okay? You have planar, which is basically the start of the simplest way, and it's literally the best way to think about it is essentially like a film projector, okay? And that it's just going to project in one. Oops. Here, I'm going to try and move it out. There we go, so you can scale it. So, okay, so you see how it's applied to the face here, but it's also going straight through the object, because it only, see how it's a planar, it's this plane, so all the texture is getting just projected straight through the object, okay? And this, you know, can be good or bad, and it's usually bad, you know. The good news is that you can also, when you go to apply these things, sort of the easiest way with an object like this is just to apply it in pieces, right? So if I want to know, or if I want to apply it to this front face only, I can just select the front face, oops, and select these guys. I'm going to redo that. that it? Yes. No. Okay, so I'm just selecting the front faces. Okay, front faces only, right? Yeah. Okay. So now, if I do a planar projection, that's this first one here, or in the toolkit. It's here in the toolkit somewhere. No, it's mainly for editing. So I'm gonna get my UV editor out again. Oh, it's already out. Never mind. I'm a planar select. So now you see it's attached that to the whole object, or no, sorry, just the faces that I chose. But from here, you see, I can mess with it so that I get it at least back close to where I wanted it to be. Okay, so meaning like I want squares out of this so that I know that, you know, any texture I throw on here is going to be not all distorted and stretched and stuff like that. Okay, so if I come back to the editor and I just grab shells, I can just put this off to the side. Okay. Like so. Come back to the object, face, you know, and just repeat that process. Oof, there's too many faces here. Yeah, way too many. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out a quick way to select most of these. Okay, boom, boom. Oof, should have made a box with a whole lot less stuff. There, just going to simplify my box. So the bummer about this is that UV editing is another thing that is dependent on the geometry, right? If I make a change like this, like you see how my UVs disappeared because I made a huge change to everything, because, you know, this vertex is no longer vertex number whatever. This is a new vertex, so all those blow away. So I'm just going to start over from scratch and rotate her back into place. Reason. Okay, so now this will make it a lot easier for me to grab faces. That's all. Boom, 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 boom. Ooh. Okay, boom, 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 boom. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, so now I go back in. Planar basically adds it like a decal, and I'm just going to sort of make it so that it's fits on there nicely. Okay, and like I said, then just move it off to the side, and then do the other faces. Okay, so this is the simplest form of doing this, right? So, you know, and obviously it's the most time consuming, especially when you're talking about a box, but, you know, there's very few cases where you would just have a box like this. You know, it would have, you know, it would have a top and you know, that like little flaps, like if it, like I was saying, it's like cereal or whatever, you know. So you would end up wanting to go in and make sure that you get all these pieces you know, created correct, or mapped correctly. Okay, so actually, where's the best? Okay, oops, let's do extrude. Stop. Oof. There we go. For some reason, it extruded some of those faces on me. Okay. Well, anyway, so you could go around the whole object and, you know, and make, you know, essentially break it apart and get all your faces, you know, so that you get nice squares here, so that when you go to put the box art on there, you know, it doesn't distort and all that stuff, right? Okay, but the beauty is that one of the best ways, or the sort of the easier ways to do an object even like this is with this automatic mapping. And automatic mapping is more just like, it's almost like applying 6 projectors at once. Okay, so when I did this one, it was applying to one set of faces and in one direction, and that's why we got good mapping on this one face, okay? If you use this guy right here, okay, and I'm going to back out, you'll see what it's doing. So it's essentially scaling and projecting in 6 directions, okay? You know, so we got, oops, we got this plane, we got that plane, that plane, and a bottom and a top. So this at least starts getting you in the ballpark of, you know, decent mapping depending on the object. Now, once again, this is just a square object, and, you know, we actually probably could have started with the, you know, leaving the box mapping and trying to just make that work. But so if you had an object that didn't come in with the UVs, and lots of times they do, this is a good start, because if you come over here, you see a lot of these things. If I go to shell, so that's my bottom, that's the side, or the that's probably the front, side, bottom, top, okay? Why I tore these apart, I'm not entirely sure. Okay. So, like I said, you know, this guy gets you sort of in a DK, you know, in a quick sheet scenario where it sort of is broken off everything into different planes, and we'll talk about a minute about how to sort of make this a little cleaner in a second. Okay, so your other types available to you are cylindrical mapping. So if I go in here, and this is obviously going to be for things that are like a cylinder. So actually looked at my apple here, so I'm going to delete the, or whatever, my very simple apple. So if I delete that shell, no wait, actually I was thinking more like this guy. So if I delete the UVs that are on this guy, since it's, you know, sort of a cylinder and sort of not, I'm going to apply cylindrical mapping to this guy. Okay, and what you'll see is it creates a cylinder that you can still modify. See, I can scale it out or wrap it around. See how it wraps around there. Okay, I can actually scale it up and down. And you definitely want to come all the way around. There we go. Okay, and then what it's showing you here is in white, these are the seams, okay? Because wherever that seam gets placed, that's going to be this end and this end, because it has to, you know, it has to cut it up somehow. So, you know, this is the line that it's choosing to cut it up on. All right, so that means that if I come over here and I select the edge, okay, you'll see it selected the other edge here, because this is essentially the same thing wrapped around in this direction. Okay, so see how it's selecting when I select all these guys, it selects both sides. Okay, that's because, like I said, it wraps completely around here. All right, and then another type we have is spherical. So it's for things that are spherical, of course, or at least kind of spherical, because once again, these, just like primitives, a lot of times these mapping types are just a getting started point. Ara, can you please shut Maya down, please? Okay, thank you. Anybody else who's still working, please shut it down. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my object mode. I'm going to grab my really simple, crappy apple here, and I'm going to put the cylinder mapper on there. Okay, so just like the other, you'll see that it wraps. I mean, you can almost visualize it in that you can see if you grab these guys right here, it's wrapping a two-dimensional texture around the object. Okay, and like I said, it's choosing a seam and it's choosing it right here. Okay, so the thing to remember about this kind of mapping is that it has to pinch at the top. So this is a good example of so this is like a, you know, any kind of map. I mean, I have a good Earth map here somewhere. There we go. So you know how you know we've all seen this kind of map, right? Where it looks like Antarctica and the South Pole are, you know, like a quarter of the landmass, but when you smush it all up, you know, when it bunches up at the top, it's actually a really tiny piece. Okay, so this is the same thing that's happening here, and you see how you actually can see how it's happening here. Okay, and that it's bunching that up. Now, you know, that's all. It's just basically something you have to, you know, either work around or live with when you're doing this kind of mapping. Okay, so that's why you see these kind of things where it's like, see how this is, I don't know, some planet or whatever. So is it Mars? Okay, so you see how it's all, you know, all stretched out and things like that. That's because all it's trying to do is map just this little part with all this area, so it all gets sort of smushed around there, okay? Or yeah, it's smushed out. Whereas out here, it's just coinciding with a polygon that's like right here, you know, in the middle, okay? So if I come in here and I'm gonna make a quick material for it. Woo. Okay, there we go. So I'm gonna make a quick material, and I'm gonna map a color. And I'm just going to grab a file, meaning a texture map. I'm actually going to point to that one. No, there it is. Okay, so that's my red file. Boom. Okay. And if you switch your mode, there's a sphere here. Oh, there it is. Okay. So then if I put this material on this object and pray that it doesn't, there it goes. Okay, and I'm seeing those because this guy right here is clicked off. When you come into the UV editor workspace, that's on there, but if it's not shown, if your textures aren't shown in the viewport, that's why. So if you turn that guy on, you'll see it. Okay, so this map essentially, yeah, great, takes all this stuff into account when it's smushing around there, and you see how it doesn't look horribly distorted. I mean, it doesn't look great. Let me throw it on another sphere. So let's see. So okay, oops, object. Okay. Yeah, so you see how it's gathering it down there within reason. Then what you see in the viewport isn't necessarily exactly what you're going to see. Okay, so if I click it on over, oops, over here, good Lord. There we go. There we go. Okay, so that shows you. So this shows you how it's exactly how it's going to be mapped on. So when you make a surface and you apply a texture to it, the UV editor here will list all the ones available to you. Okay, and you know you can just have the surface. It's going to try and render the color of the surface on there eventually, or you can come back to your texture. Okay, so if you have a few of them on there, you can choose which ones you want to show up here. Okay, so now you'll see, like I said, when we're doing a cylindrical or a spherical mapping, it's pinching up this dot right here. That might be at the bottom. No, here it is. Okay, so it's pinching right there and then projecting all that through these faces right here, so that you still see all your faces. See, okay. You see how it's working. So the cool thing is that there are lots of maps that are already set up this way. If you go and you get like you get any of these maps like this big Earth map, it's already in this projection mode. Okay, so, and this is your polar projection mode, meaning it has poles that pinch and smush together. Okay, and there's different ways that you can present the Earth, but when you do a polar projection and you create I'm going to make another sphere and put it on there. There it is. You'll see that it looks correct. So that's the nice thing about that. Instead of pinching and looking weird, it functions just right. So, damn it. you know, like I said, what you see in the viewport isn't exactly, you know, this is the hardware. In fact, I don't know if I have enough lights in here to render it, but we'll give it a shot. Ooh, no. Yeah, not enough lights. Okay. Okay. So if I come back to poly modeling, so okay, so we have projection plane modeling, which is literally, you know, gonna put a new UV selection on any selection that you have, whether it's the whole object or whatever. So if I select some faces and I hit that, it's just going to put it on those faces. So if I needed to, you know, bump these out for some reason or other, okay, you can do that. Cylindrical, it's going to, you know, map things that just in a cylinder, perfect for any kind of cylinder. Like in the test scene I made here, I made this little guy, this little, I don't know. It's just a, you know, whatever, like a little knick-knack thing or whatever, okay? So this is a good one for cylinder mapping, okay? Because it's essentially a cylinder, even though it's square, you know, it wraps around within reason, okay? A leaf is a great example of projection mapping, or sorry, is planar mapping. That's that first one, right? So we select our object, we hit planar. Oh, I have to move it. Another way to get at this is the option called best plane. And what that does is you essentially pose the object you want to project the plane through. Hit that. Okay, so now, you know, I wouldn't want it this way. I want to project the leaf texture right on top of this, and it says press enter, enter. There we go. So now what I get over here, it looks like, you know, it's essentially the same object, okay? So if I come over here and I'm going to make another surface, okay, and keep it simple, I'm just going to grab another file, and I grabbed a leaf texture. There we go. And now throw it on this object. So I'm not worried. All I'm worried about right now is how the texture lays on the object, right? Not, you know, what the rest of it's like, obviously. Okay. So what you'll see here is when I select the object, it's going to show me the texture leaf in the UV editor, and then it's going to show me you know, how it's showing up on the object, okay? So this is exactly why we edit UVs, okay? It doesn't know, how do you want me to put this sticker on the object, okay? It's got some UV, so it's at least on there, but it's not, you know, it's not correct, right? It's not where I want it to be. So all I'd have to do is take these guys, rotate them, scale them, okay? And just sort of start getting them into place. Maybe rotate a little more to get that main thing. Okay, so now at least it's on the object. It's getting close, okay? Now remember, since this is planar projection, it's going through the object to the other side, okay? Sometimes that's fine, sometimes that's not good, and you'd have to, you know, tear this apart so that if you wanted to map the bottom half separately, okay? So to make this work a little better, all we'd have to do is go into the actual UV editing part, or sorry, the UV, you know, level, you know, versus grabbing the whole object. And there's some nice little tools in here. If you go to the UV toolkit, you know how we have our modeling toolkit in the modeling area. We have a UV toolkit, which gives you lots of options. Okay, like a lot of options. Okay, and one of the nicest ones here is one called Tweak Marquee. And what Tweak Marquee does is, you know how usually you have to select points, then move them, select and move, select and move. Tweak Marquee allows you just to grab points and move them into place. Like everything that you hover over, see, I can start moving these guys, okay? And just like in the modeling toolkit, your soft selections work too. So, you know, I can turn on soft selection here. I can bring my radius down so that you can kind of treat it like, oops, like rubber, like so. Maybe that's a little high. So now I'm moving a bunch of stuff at once to kind of just get it into place. Now obviously I don't want to go too far off or I'm going to get onto the white there. Okay, maybe 0.05. This is not quite right. And I'm just trying to get that along the seam there. So you see how I'm not changing the geometry, but I'm changing the relationship between the UVs and how it's going to map onto the object and the texture that I've chosen. Okay, so this kind of goes both ways in that you can map and then texture, or if you have a texture in mind, you can just make the map work, and that's essentially what I'm doing here. I'm just sort of forcing this map to work on this object. Okay. So I'll turn off soft selection and just make sure that seam is right on that main section. Maybe move these guys out a little. So that's drag marquee, okay, or tweak marquee. So that allows you to just, like I said, move without having to select and move. It just saves you a step when you're going to tweak stuff out. And there's some out here too. So that's not too bad right there. You know, depending on how close I need to get to it, it's not too bad. So once you've done this, you know, you can do anything you like with these UVs. Meaning, like, I could take this, if I took this map into Photoshop, turn it into black and white, and maybe painted these dark. You know, painted the low parts dark and kept the lighter parts sort of pushed up. I could create a bump map out of this and it would map the exact same way. So you're giving Maya a guide on how to put textures onto an object, okay? That's really, you know, all you're doing here, okay? And like I said, you know, for this object, you know, once again, like letting it project through the object is probably just fine. You know, there's no need, because you see, since it's actually got a little bit of a thickness to it, which we'll see there. You know, there's two, you know, but seeing through it is not, you know, it's not the end of the world. It's not bad. This I probably leave this. You know, it's a little thick, obviously, but it's a start. Okay, so you could you know, like I said, you could also take this map, you know, this leaf map. There it is, and you could paint, you know. You could paint another map that has, like, you know, light areas here and dark areas there, just like the bump map. You could probably use this for the same one, and you could create a map that says how much you should see through it, right? And it would be a black and white map, and you know, that would, you know, control the translucency, because, you know, these areas are thicker, so less light gets through them, whereas these green areas, a lot of light gets through. So depending on, you know, what you are trying to do with this model, you could go nuts with, you know, you could make these areas shinier and these areas less shiny by, like I said, you know, painting a variant map out of this in Photoshop or any other program you wanted to paint that in. Okay. What did I do? There it goes. Okay. So like I said, that's projection map. Okay, so now the thing to remember about, one of the things to remember about UVs is that they work, I mean, in this instance, in the way we're going to talk about them, they work in a square. You notice how they're a square here, okay? And the way that works, and I brought a nice little demo thingy here. Okay, so you notice, like, even though this image that we started working with here, this leaf, you know, it's not exactly square. It's, you know, it's a little oblong or whatever, right? You're going to see it in the viewport exactly square here, okay? And that's because UV maps, essentially, what you're saying is, what you're trying to say is, like, when, like, you can think of a image as having coordinates the same way that an object has coordinates, in that down at the bottom here you can, you know, think of, or is it the other top? Is it the top? Hold on. Oops. Not sure they call it out here. They call one. So yeah, they sort of, there's a few ways to look at this, but if you see here, that you see how it says 1, well, I guess the more I zoom in, the less you can see it. So it says 1 right here, and it says 1 right there. So yeah, so what it's doing is if you think of an exactly square image, okay, and you think of this as pixel number 0, 0, right in the corner, right, and the one next to it would be, you know, x. In the meaning, like, you know, if this was the x direction and this was the y direction, just like in Maya, okay, it's two-dimensional, so you're not going to get a z. So the pixel next to it would be, you know, x1, y0, okay, x2, y0, and then yeah, and then up would be your y direction, 0 all the way up to 1. Okay, so 0 through 99, 0.99 to 1. Okay, so all we're trying to do here, and you can actually see these values if you really dig in there, is what we're trying to say is, like, whatever pixel, like if I put this UV, I grab one of them here, and I move them right there, right on that. Okay. What that's saying is that's 0.1 in this direction, because it's 0.1, 0.2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 1. Okay, so that's 0.1 in the x in the y, and 0.1 in the x. So all it's saying is just map that to whatever that wherever that shows up on the object. So if you look at this guy, that's right here, okay, and that's what they're trying to insinuate with this map, okay, is this is, you know, this is how it's broken apart, okay, and these things are just these are a way to actually help you figure out where stuff's at. People use these maps to sort of just find their way. In that, if I come over here and I'm gonna grab the bowl, okay, isolate it, and I'm gonna make another quick surface, and then there's a bunch of these testers. It depends on what you're looking for here. There's a really garish one there. So shader, standard surface, color, file, and then what file, and I'm going to point to, and these are all out there too, by the way, on the in today's class 17, because these are these ones, at least these UV checkers, are good to have around. So if I put that one on there, okay, and I put it on the object, there we go, dump it on the object, there we go. So now you'll see exactly how things are corresponding, you know, on the object itself, okay? So that means if I was trying to paint something specific, okay, you could go back to a render or whatever, or, you know, you could just sort of find your way, because if I select that object, I now know that if I select the face, you know, you'll see how it matches up. So there's sort of coordinate 07, and that matches up right there with A07 and all that stuff. So if you were trying to, you know, either make this, you know, meet exactly at a certain spot or whatever, these maps help you sort of find your way on where you're at on the object, okay? And you remember when I cylindrically mapped this guy, wait, did I cylindrically or spherically? I did, okay. So what you're getting there is the problem with these, with using sort of a simplified version is, once again, is that it projects through the object, right? So even cylindrical mapping is going to project, like, so if you look here, so if I come in the inside and I select these faces, it's D05, and I come to the outside, it's the same thing, D05, right? That's because when it projected cylindrically towards the object, it found this face, and then it found the inside face, right? Well, that's not going to work if you're trying to make this object so that you could paint the whole thing, or you don't want it, you don't want it to repeat, or, it just looks bad. This doesn't make sense, right? So that's why this is just sort of a start. So there's a bunch of ways of going about fixing this, and see, you get this too. See, since it's since it was projecting once again cylindrically, and this is almost flat, see how it's like smeared through the object? So if I come in through here and I grab those, grab those edges, you'll see they show up in the map, and you can actually see it. You see how they're, see these are those faces, and you see how, so all it's, or sorry, these edges, see how it's only using this little piece of the map, right? And that's where you get all this kind of smearing and stuff like that, right? So, you know, if I take one of these and I move it down, see how it starts to behave, essentially, you know, look like it's got the right texture on it. Maybe if I move this up, okay. So the best way to do this would probably be to grab a whole bunch of them. I mean, the easiest way in this instance is to grab all the way out to wherever it's going to be projected through, okay, and move it up here. You can see how it's, there we go. Then we take the whole thing, and I'm going to scale it back down and move it in to the bounds. Because basically anything, what's going to happen here, you know, this is why we stay within 0 to 1, because anything that goes out of bounds is essentially going to be repeated. See how you see it, you know, over and over all the way out here. And this is when I was messing with scale and things like that. If I go like this, you'll see you're repeating the texture over and over inside the object. Okay, so if we want to be able to map, like, you know, every piece of the object separately, we needed to stay within the 0 to 1 bounds of our texture, okay? And you know, there's sort of ways around this, but for now, this is the way we're going to talk about it. In games, they have some other stuff that sort of helps you get around this stuff. But like I said, for today, we have to talk about it this way. So now you see I'm starting to get, you know, surfaces that don't, so I have F06, or, you know, sort of quadrant F06, wherever it is, right there, and I go up. Okay, now you can see that it's wrapping, starting to wrap, whoa, with a big old stretch, inside and into the object. Oh, it's upside down. Oh, I see. So we actually need to rotate that around. Okay. Let's see if I can, I'm just going to put it back down. So, oh boy. This is why I told you that this sucks. I hate this. Because you run into these kind of things. So I'm gonna go in. So I grabbed my inside. I backed up just to where I'm grabbing the inside faces. I'm gonna come move them up here, and then I need to rotate them up and down. Oops. So I've exposed. You know, I got them so that they're exposed, but you see how they're backwards, so they actually sort of flip around. So let's see if we can just grab an edge. So there's one edge. Oh, I see. Then the next edge, and then that edge, that edge, that edge. Okay, there we go. So now they're, I'm not going to do the rest of them, but you see how they're starting to now then wrap properly inside the object here. So if I come back over here and I change, if I come back to Hypershade, I'm actually going to swap that out with a better surface. So one way to do this too is to keep this handy is, you know, there's nothing stopping you from, you know, grabbing this UV checker and duplicating it, okay, and then just switching it out, and then I'm gonna grab my texture that I want to put on there. I think it's this one. Yeah, that's it. Okay, there we go. There we go. So now you see, now we see how it's starting to you know, map on the object. So it comes up and around. So this face is mapped to this area of the map, is, you know, yeah, mapped to that area of the map. Come up here, up, up, And then it starts to get small. Up, up. And it stretches again. Damn it. That's right. That's not. Oh yeah, it's way off. But you can see the change that it makes. So, you know, sometimes you have to go in there and you got to tweak that kind of stuff to get it to work. So I'm not going to do the whole thing, but you get the point where, see, if I move that, I'm sort of using more of the material. Okay. And that one, the easiest way. Hold on. So I'm going to just move these guys out of the way because I know they're messed up. So I'm going to come back to edge. There we go. Great. That'll give me the next one. And next one. And okay. Like I said, I'm not going to do all these, but I think you see. So you see now the texture's starting to get on there properly, okay, without stretching. It's wrapping over the top. It's not stretching because we're exposing those out because you know, when you have UVs that are on top of each other, you can see exactly what's happening. You know, that means that whatever texture falls inside here has to fill this whole space. Like if this, you know, this is the face that we're concerned about, like if you look at the actual face, obviously this isn't going to work. You're going to be using this little sample, and that's why it's stretched, right? So if I, you know, make it more towards the aspect ratio of the face, you see it starts to look right, you know, and that's what we're really trying to do, you know, as much as we possibly can. And, you know, we'll see that that's not always possible, but that's, like I said, that's what you're trying to do here. Okay, so there we go. So it's starting to work. Okay, so this is, you know, once again, this is trying to make an existing texture that we just saw here work versus paint a texture. The really good news is if you have reasonably decent UVs, if you come over to Mudbox or any of your object painting software, what it does is it sort of paints in 2 dimensions and then projects it after you're sort of done painting, right? So the good news is you can use fairly decent UVs, and if you're painting something, you can get away with seams and things like that, right? Because obviously there's no way, well, there is, but with this texture, there's no way to just make it wrap around itself, okay? And okay, so no matter what, wherever that seam is, remember we talked about the seam because, you know, this edge has to meet somewhere, okay? And that's that. So this edge goes around the object and gets mapped to, so this is this face, okay, and it's right there. And then this is its other face, and it's mapped to this part of the map, right? So that's why we're getting, you see how it doesn't jive very well, you know, because it has to put seam somewhere because this is a 2D map on a 3D object, okay? So, like I said, the good news is as long as things are sort of exposed properly, meaning the faces are laid out so that you're not getting a bunch of pinching and stuff like that. Let me move this over to the side, which is what we're getting here. You see this? So if I come over to here, once again, this is using too much of the map, okay? Hey, what's going on? Yeah, no, see, there it is. Okay, so it's using this tiny sliver. So as long as things are laid out, you know, both aspect ratio wise and real estate wise, you're going to be able to paint your own maps without a whole lot of problem. Meaning, like, you know, a little polygon down here, okay, should take up, you know, about that amount of space in your texture map, okay? Whereas these sides, obviously you're going to want a nice big fat, you know, chunk of real estate in the map to represent that, because if I shrink it down, you know, it looks all, you know, looks, let's see, there it goes. So if I shrink that down, you see what it's doing is blowing out, because it's literally just you know, all you're doing is describing how to take the pixels, you know, if I zoom way in there, how to take this pixel or that pixel, where do you want me to put that on the object? That's all you're saying, right? So that means that if you use a little tiny amount of the shape on the in the texture map, then it's going to put a tiny amount on there. And if it's, you know, a big wide area, obviously it's just doing what it's told. Okay. So the thing that you don't want is you want everything, like I said, exposed. This object being a good example of one that, you know, you'd either pluck apart or use a different method, okay? Or you know, like you move things apart, like I was just doing here to kind of get that to work. So, you know, if I kept going with that, you know, you're just essentially building it, you know, piece by piece. Okay. This one sort of wraps around itself. That's why it's weird. So the good news is you can select whichever way makes the most sense. You can select in the viewport to grab the edges, and then it'll select the corresponding UVs, or vice versa. You can select them in here, and it'll select the corresponding corresponding faces or edges in the thing, edges on the object. I got something tangled up here. Somebody's not quite right. Okay. Well, anyways, I'm just gonna. So what you would do with this is just continue to sort of figure out, you know, which ones are on top of each other. So if I come in here, you'll see. So if I select this, see how it's mapped to the bottom right there. Let me turn it off. So it's right there. Okay. That means that these guys then curl up underneath there, because it's projecting through the object. So the easiest way would be to just, you know, start moving them down. Okay, moving them down. Moving that one down. I should have made a simpler object and I wouldn't go through all this. Okay, so now we're just about there. So, no we're not. There we go. And then this is that final point. You see, they all gather to this point, okay? So then I go in and grab that last UV, move it down. Now everything is, you know, now every face of the object, because you see how the border is white. That means, you know, that's the border that we see here. Every last bit of it is exposed somewhere here, okay? Well, not at the top, but it isn't through here. So you know, this is what it is, because we're using just a flat map that doesn't have that kind of projection that deals with this. So, you know, you could remap the bottom with a, you know, in a flat way, and then just, you know, get, you know, kind of hide the edges in through here. There's a, you know, a few different things you can do there, okay? But like I said, the goal here, once again, is just to expose all the UVs as much as humanly possible, and using just as much as the map as it should. Okay, because like I said, when you go over into things like Mudbox, there's a whole bunch of different ones, but I think the one that, you know, you'll have here, ZBrush can do texture painting too. Where'd it go? Oh, Autodesk. Yeah, Mudbox. So they have both versions here. So you can texture. You know, that was the one I was telling you is like a ZBrush competitor. You can go in and you can sculpt the objects and do that kind of stuff. But you can also paint your own texture maps or lay them down and stuff like that. Okay, but all we're talking about today is how to get the UVs on there and get the mapping done. So I'm going to go into another object and show you. So I made this table too. This is another kind of a good bad example, in that, you know, it's got all these pieces, right? And I grabbed a
Will you be putting this on?
Yeah, it's out there actually already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will you be putting like the completed thing that we do class?
Sure. Yeah, that's cool. So I did grab a couple of interesting examples here that you can sort of see. So this is the texture. The texture, and then it's, you know, how it's correspondingly mapped onto the object, and you can see what's going on here, and that, you know, it doesn't, you know, particularly look like anything, because, you know, the person chopped the arms off, you know, chopped the legs off, exposed all the UVs, you know, like so, probably painted this in another, in some kind of program or whatever, and then it all goes back together like this. So he's not showing the wireframe on the top of it, but I do have something like that here somewhere. So, you know, this is another one. So this would be, you know, for obviously a person's torso, and that, you know, they've mapped these are the arms. This is the head and neck area, torso, eyeball, I don't know, something, pants, maybe pants, back, and then you see they got the hands splayed out here, and looks like boots or something like that. These are probably pants then. So you see what's going on here. You know, that all the, you know, you can see what this object would look like, you know, but all the pieces are splayed out, you know, one by one. It's like, or not necessarily one by one. You can use tools to do that, but, you know, think of it as, you know, a pelt. You know, like you've all seen, you know, like a deer or whatever, you know, or a bearskin rug where they, you know, they take it and they, you know, it's sliced and all the pieces are sort of splayed out. Okay, that's what we're doing. You know, we have to tell the computer how you want the colors mapped to the object, and that's all we're doing here. Where's the one with the?
You guys need to have the UV map first, though, right? Like, you can't just get a picture like that, just drawing it.
Absolutely, yeah. You should exactly. Yep. You have to have a UV map first. Exactly. Okay, so this is somebody else's, you know, pelted out object. It's hard to say what this is, but you can see what they've done here. You know, everything. You know, there's nothing overlapping. Everything is exposed. That means that, you know, in the night, you know, the good thing is that it corresponds to, you know, it corresponds to your mesh. You know, it's usually recognizable. It's, oh, for gosh sakes. Okay, yeah, so you can see, I mean, this is just, you know, it's just the polygons, you know, torn apart and, you know, made sure that you can, you know, get at them, you know. So, and then, you know, it doesn't have to be always perfect, you know, like they've obviously given lots of care to, you know, these bigger areas, whereas, you know, this might be like the inside of somebody's ear or something like that, where you don't need to worry so much. You're just trying to get some color there or whatever, you know. So, you know, it's, you know, doing this is really, it's a strategy, you know, and there's a bunch of ways to go about it, and there's different tools to help you, you know. So like I said, I find it to be a huge pain, but it's what needs to be done. So, you know, here's a head that's fairly decent. So you can see if you cylindrically map this onto a head, most of it is splayed out. It's not perfect because obviously underneath the ears, you know, aren't there, and, you know, some other things, you know, these things would overlap each other, and, you know, you'd get an ear that would be projected onto the you know, faces that are underneath here, right? So this is good. It's a good start, but this actually wouldn't get you everything that you want. So here's another one for like some kind of character. There's a lot going on here. So there's armor pieces. I don't know what it's like, an arm, but it kind of looks like a stump. More armor, a lot of armor, basically. But you see the face, and you see there. So here's where they you know, rolled out the eyeballs, and, you know, they're projecting it on the eyeballs here. So this is what you call a decal sheet, okay? And it's essentially, you know, everything that you would need to texture that object, okay? This whatever this character was, you know, out there. So they went in, they modeled this thing up, they splayed all this stuff out, then painted this texture map, okay? And how they did it is, you know, it's hard to say. There, like I said, there are tons of tools to help you with this. Lots of times people will just take, you know, like to do skin. Why reinvent the wheel? You know, you get a bunch of skin texture maps, you know, or photos or whatever, and you plop them down and things like that, or you put, you know, like this one of this guy's head would be a really good one. Like, you know, if you could get it to match where the eyes were supposed to, you know, should be, it's going to look really real because it is real, you know, whereas, like I said, the ears, not so good, and things like that. So you can come at it from both directions. You can make UVs fit a texture, or you can paint the texture once you've got your UVs done, okay? So it's all depending on what you sort of have and what you're trying to do, you know, like I said, you know, for this, like this guy, you know, you would bring this in and then find your eyeball UVs and make sure that they match where they're supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like, so if I had a head mesh, which I do somewhere, Hold on, just 1 second. Let me pull it in. I think I put one out there. Basic sub D head. How basic? No, that's that. Oh, there it. Oh, well, that's too crappy to work. But you know, if you had a head with some detail, what I was saying there is, you know, you would go in and you would. Good Lord. Sorry, you would grab the UVs like, you know. There we go. Boy. So yeah, you see this one, this is how it's mapped. It is absolutely useless, right? So you would just blow those away, start over for sure. Okay. So anyways, what I was trying to say is, you know, you would take these vertexes and, you know, you would bring that map in and just make sure that that this area's vertexes go right there. So like I said, you can go in either direction. It all depends on you know, what you're trying to do. Okay, so what I want to talk about is this table real quick, because this is probably an easier oh, mercy. There. Okay, so I'm gonna isolate my table. It was made from a square, made from a cube, so I get my those UVs for those. I'm just going to delete. So what you see here is obviously, you know, I started out from a cube like we've done with other objects, okay? And I just extruded this up and blah blah blah, and you know, and just did a quick polygon, you know, model with this, right? So like I said, you know, you get those UVs at the start for free, but you know, they don't give you all that much because they don't change with the as you model. Okay, you don't get new stuff, right? So if I select here, you'll see all those. Let's see, everybody's selected in green. Yeah, everything selected in green is mapped to just that area right there, right? So it's the bottom of these arms or whatever, or the feet, the table feet and stuff like that. Whereas if I come down here, since the whole top was made out of that, yeah. So all these guys are all inside here. So if I select this face, just this face, and move it out, oh, it's connected to that, and it's connected to that. Okay. So it's like it's like when you're untangling Christmas lights, you know, it's just a mess, right? Like stuff is just on top of itself, right? So I'm sure you can see why this would be not good, because whatever's showing up here in the texture map, and I'll go make a quick surface, is going to be on every single one of those faces, right? So, you know, that's no good. That's not going to work because it's just going to repeat all over the place, okay? So I'm going to come over, make a new surface, dump it on there. Ooh, mercy. Oh. Dump it on there. Boom. And then I got a wood texture. Just see, I'm prepared today, like not just winging this. Okay, so we get our texture. Like I said, I got a decent wood here somewhere. Wood, here it is. Okay. And you'll see it shows up in the object. So when it bogs like that, that's Maya, or sorry, that's Arnold. Or it's Maya loading it in onto the graphics card and loading it into memory and things like that. So you know, it doesn't look ridiculously horrible, but obviously you see how it's stretching through the object and all that stuff. Like, you know, you don't want this, obviously, right? So this is the situation where, you know, it has to be sort of torn apart and made a little more, or a lot more graceful, and you can choose exactly how you want to do that, right? And it's like I said, it's really about one of, you know, a bunch of different strategies. And I think for this object, I mean, the easiest way is you could kind of think of it as a few different objects that are pretty much square within reason, right? So if I took the top and I expanded my selection here, okay, and I'm going to stop right there, okay, at the base. And, oh wait, first of all, I'm just going to delete all these UVs because they suck. Okay, so now you see by deleting them now, it's like it hasn't the slightest idea on how to map this thing. And in fact, every single thing is mapped to this, whatever pixel is right there, you know, 0, 0, 0, 0. That's why it pretty much matches that color right there, okay? So I'm going to come back and select my faces again, okay? Boom, 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 boom. Now remember, you can break these things up, right? So I'm going to do this first, and then I'll do the other parts later, or second, okay? So since this is essentially, it's roughly a box, I can do that best projection method, which is going to project from every angle, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay? You'll see what I get, okay? Ooh, I gotta zoom way out. There we go. So what it does is essentially just busts it apart into a bunch of different pieces, okay? Which is, not bad in this instance, okay? So I'm just gonna hit Q to be done with that. So, and then I'm gonna look and see who's who here, right? So this is the underside. So where's the, let's see, so the major underside is right there, okay? The side, that side is there, that side is there, and et cetera, okay? Okay, so that's a good start. Now, and you see it doesn't look too bad already. It's a, like I said, it's a good start. It's just there's some weirdness going on, but we'll go fix that, right? So that's that part. So I'll grab all these guys and I'm going to move them off to the side, because when we do another projection, they're going to show up right on top of each other. So I'll just move it over here, okay? And they could actually stay over there if we really wanted them to, but I'm going to put them back properly. So, okay, so I'm going to grab all this stuff. Actually, how about this? Boom, 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 boom. Expand my selection. I'm going to grab the base part here. Yeah, I'll do this too. Okay, boom, boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. And boom, 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 and that piece. Okay, so this is my next piece that I'm calling, one, like I said, one piece essentially, right? And I think even, this one being sort of a cylinder, I'm actually probably going to treat it that way. Now when I throw that on there, the thing that you'll have to look out, or we'll have to look out for, obviously, is it's going to project cylindrically around this object. That means that these faces up underneath here are going to get, projected with essentially 1 pixel, right? And you'll see what we get out of that when I actually do it, right? So I could do the same thing, right, with the multi-face one here. But since you can think of it like this would probably be made out of 1 piece of wood, right? So why not try to wrap the texture, this texture, around it, okay? Around it this way, okay? So that's cylindrical mapping is right here. Remember, planar, cylindrical, spherical, best face. Not that one. Okay, so boom, we go like that. Now you see it's already wrapped most of the way around, and I'm going to come all the way, make it meet all the way around. You can see it looks pretty good. So you see you can actually see what it's doing over here when I mess with it, okay? And you can see how the faces are like that. So you see I don't have those seams. It's not broken up into a bunch of pieces. That means that I'm gonna hit Q because I'm done with this, okay? That means that these faces are getting mapped in a nice fashion. Let's see, they're getting mapped so that they meet and just continue on. So it's like a nice graceful way to do it. And you see it looks pretty good, But you see what I'm saying? Because of cylindrical mapping, when it, since it's 2-dimensional and not a sphere or anything like that, these guys, you see how stretched these guys are, right? And you're getting it here, and you're going to get it under there. But all we got to do to fix that is grab those edges, and you'll see, they're right on top of another set of edges. I move it down. Oops. Up. So I move this. Grab those ones. So now they're starting to use some of the map. So this is because it's doing it in the video card. That's why it's doing this kind of stuff. Let me get a light in there, and I'll show you. So I'm going to actually render this so that we can see. So, because you know, when it does it in the viewport, it's not doing it sort of. It does the best it can, but it's not going to show it to you exactly the way it's going to render. So I'm going to put a light under there that's probably way too bright. Okay, and Arnold. Ooh, oh, it's still not quite right. You can see it's actually showing to fairly accurately. See how it's kind of a little wiggy there, kind of like taking a little jog. Okay, so just keep playing with just those edges there. Maybe giving them a little more material. There we go. So you see what's going on here is I'm exposing the faces properly, and then it's like there's the top, there's the bottom side of that piece, there's the whole arm, then we've got, oops, then we've got this area, right? And you notice how when I select that polygon, see how it's flat there? That's because, you know, it's for all that UV map knows, it's perfectly flat because it projected, you know, just literally like a tube on there, and that means that it projected straight through those faces, right? So you got to fix that, just like the top. I'm gonna grab those edges, move them up, and boom, now we see our polygon, and that's it right there. Whereas before it was smushed like this, and it didn't even, you know, you wouldn't even know it's there. And I don't know if you can scale it because it's 0. No, you can't scale it. So all you can do is move that to expose those faces, right? So now that face is at least using part of the map properly, right? And so we'd have that here. You just move that up, let it share some of the map. The bottom's going to be screwed up too. So this guy down this area underneath. See how messed up the bottom is? But like I was saying, is, you know, it's like sometimes it's like if you're never going to turn this over, screw it. Like, who cares, right? Like, you know, it all depends. Like, I probably wouldn't have bothered with the bottom of the table too much, you know, and you can also, you know, take a face like this and so, you know, you'd have to sort of handle this face properly. But so if I grab this edge, there we go. So that's sort of distorting that guy, so I don't even want that. So if I go to UVs, so I'm grabbing the points themselves. Yes, let's see. There we go. So it's a, you know, it's, let's see. I don't want that. So there's only one seam, so it's actually, you know, you probably cut this off and probably take the bottom and actually give it its own. If you really wanted to worry about it, you know, you'd give it its own piece of the map, because here it is, and you know, it doesn't want to sort of behave, right? Because it's attached. There's no, you notice how there's only one seam. That means I can't pop it apart to sort of do anything else with it. Okay, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to, like I said, not worry about it. So we're getting decent. We're getting decent mapping here. We're getting okay mapping on these areas. I don't know why they're not. Why they're distorted a little bit, I'm not quite sure. But you see, I think you see what I'm saying. You have to expose all those areas if you're going to get, you know, if you're going to get something good on them that doesn't look super weird, you know. Okay. And then the legs, probably handle the legs. Let me move these guys. So UV shell, which will grab the whole base or whatever you want to call it there. Move that off to the side. Now these, since these are separated off, these are their own UV shells, even though they don't have UVs assigned to them. So it's nice you don't have to grab the faces. And I'm going to go back to polygon modeling and do that kind of mapping on it again. Sorry, do what do they call it? Automatic. They call it this is automatic plane mapping, right? So it's gonna just put one on each face like that, okay? And Q, do the same thing. Oh wait, let me move these guys out of the way. So okay, I think I'm only gonna deal with one of these legs because why not? Okay, so the deal that you'll see here, or you know, just like I was talking about with the leaf, right? Just because, you know, you want this texture to be on there doesn't mean that, you know, and you've given it UVs, doesn't mean that it knows exactly how to put it on there, right? So you'll notice that, like, well, I got lucky here in that, like, the wood is largely going the right direction through here, right? But there's no reason that it couldn't have been like this, right? And, you know, that doesn't look right. We want our wood to go this way, and we want it to go up this direction, right? So, you know, now is the time where you sort of have to finesse this stuff into place and get what you're actually looking for versus what Maya just did there, right? And one of the best ways is, you know, when I'm using that automatic plane mapping tool, notice how I busted it apart into 5 different planes because there's no backside here, right? Well, that means that these seams, and if I could find them, and if you can see it, as I move these around, obviously, you know, it doesn't care about the relationship to its the next face the next face, right? So I could go through it, I could do whatever I want, essentially, right? So that's where the UV editing tools come in handy, or some of the tools come in handy. There's essentially, the best face tool blew everything apart. We use our other tools to essentially put things back together the right way. Okay, so nothing's going to be automatic here. It's not going to figure any of this stuff out, for itself, because it doesn't know when you selected this chunk or that chunk that these all should really stay together, or you're trying to put wood on it. It doesn't know. It's just a way to get some UVs on there, right? So if I go into so if I open up the UV toolbar, which I get right here, okay, you get a ton of options here that I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but so one of them is the ability to, like I was saying, sort of stitch stuff back together. Okay, so I talked a bit about how, so that's the end, how you can identify your faces and how they should go together, right? And the relationships between them, and that faces that share an edge, like when I select one, this edge here is, since it belongs to this face and this face, that means that they, like I said, they share this edge, right? Even though we got 2 different pieces of the UV. The beauty is that we have stitching tools which allow you to snap things back together, right? So now they are sharing the same piece of the texture map, right? So if I select the next one, stitch together, see how it's putting it back together for me? Okay, so now I have something that essentially wraps around the object, okay, and works sort of reasonably properly, right? But this is where I would definitely, since I want the wood texture, it goes up and down here, to go through the wood. Essentially, I'm gonna make it so that it goes through the wood properly. So I'm just gonna move all these. Okay, and you can actually see it starting to behave, right? So that's probably this guy right here. See if I go like that. Now the wood flows properly through the object because, just like I was saying, either in this instance, I'm making the UVs behave with the texture map that I've got available, right? So now I got a nice thing going here. The wood goes through there, and when it wraps around, it makes sense. Wraps around here, it makes sense. Wraps around there, it makes sense. Yada yada yada. Okay. So like I said, that essentially puts that piece of the puzzle back together, and all I have is the end here. Okay, which you do something else with, and then I have one seam. Actually, I should have selected the seam that was down here, but Yeah, whatever. I'm not gonna worry. Well, let's break it apart. Okay, so boom. Okay, so I just busted that piece off because I want to make it so that my seam is actually down here. So I'm going to grab this piece and stitch together. Wait, no, stitch that together. Sorry, stitch that together, and it moves over there. So now I've hidden my seam down here instead versus having to go through there. And then I just move the pieces. UV shell. Oh, I'm getting. Oh, I'm in that mode. There we go. There we go. So you see what I'm saying? It wraps around there nicely. The end, you would probably texture map differently, or you could just sort of, depending on what you want to do with it. I guess if you really wanted to get nuts, you could grab this edge, UV toolkit, stitch together. Ugh. Yeah, that's pretty. It's not good. Well, it's something. At least it goes through there. It's not very natural. Like if this was cut off the end of wood, you'd, probably want to modify this texture map so you have some cut off wood at the end or whatever. Okay. So if I take this piece and I've sort of solved that piece, now I'm going to deal with my top, right? Now, I just essentially, follow the same procedure, right? And I just go in and I grab an edge, right? So what you're going to see here is, so this is my top, obviously, right? In fact, let's just build it from the top, right? So here's my top, and I grab this edge to find out who's connected to it. You see right in through here. So this face is obviously that guy right there, right? So if I come in, select this edge, stitch together, come back over, it's moved it over and snapped it on there. And you can basically do this all the way out. Stitch together. Ooh, took a big ass piece. Oh, I see. That's the whole bottom. Okay, I'll go in this direction. Stitch together. Okay. So what it's done is it's taken that face, that face. So you got to be careful because now you see that this edge, what it's done is it's grabbed. I'm gonna probably break this apart. So this whole bottom half, which came from another, the bottom projection, is all of this, but also that means that this face, or this edge, is connected here, and it's connected there. Because if you think of this area as sort of a hinge, this flops around and meets the other this edge, right? So we can't have that. So we have to essentially break this and decide where we want to do that, because like I said, we're trying to expose all the faces, right? So in this instance, I think I'm going to go in and maybe break these two faces, or break these two edges right here. That's what cut does, right? So if I grab a couple of edges, cut, it means I get a new polygon, or a new edge. No, sorry, a new shell. Jeez. Grab those edges, grab that edge, so it shares, should share. Oh, shoot it, wait. There it goes. So now if I stitch that together, it moves that up here. That means I can keep going around my object and snap pieces on there. So it's taking them from over here. You see all this? See how all these things are highlighting, right? Okay. Okay, so if I click that, what it corresponds to in the viewport is this piece and this face, okay? So if I stitch together, it's moved another big piece over, and that's that next chunk, right? So since these are small pieces and they're the underside, we don't need to worry as much about them. In fact, I may break those off, because all we're trying to do is map sort of this way. In fact, tell you what, I'm gonna grab an edge out here. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna change my strategy so that I'm mapping this face, that face, that face, and that face, so that these are all continuous. And the only way to do that is to sort of break that up. So I'm gonna come in here to these edges, and I'm gonna cut that. Okay. So now we have see how we have a white seam. Boom, there and there. Oops. There and there. Cut. because otherwise I'm going to get a lot of blank space where it's trying to map the, the inside of, if this area. Sorry if this part's getting a little confusing, because I basically changed, but that's how mapping works. You sort of change, you sort of zigzag. So I'm going to come in here, stitch together, stitch together, stitch together, and you'll see that these pieces are starting to, see how they're lining up here, and it starts to make sense in that it's like, so this is this side of this table, right? So now this, and this. See how that splays out nicely there? That's this side, then it wraps underneath, then this is that other side. This wraps underneath, and then this is this side. And then I can grab another edge, stitch that together. Oops, that's that big wad piece, so I'll come back and fix that. So the nice thing is it finds it, in your sort of little stack here and puts it together. So boom, 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 and boom. And the next one may not want to work. Yeah, that don't work. Okay, so you see here, I don't have any white, I don't have any white border edges overlapping each other. And if we come out here, all of it is mapped correctly all the way up until sort of underneath there. Tell you what, let's break that. Break that. So those are those edges right there. So you see what I'm doing as I'm trying to sort of wrap from the top. Oop, 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 oop. Cut. I'm trying to wrap from the top and then around the outsides. Okay, stitch together, stitch together, stitch together, stitch together. There we go. And that one. There we go. Okay, so there we go. So in the view, in the viewport, you see what I get here. I get a nice tape. So this is the these are the corner seams, and then this is the whole top, right? And sorry, hold on. There we go. Oh dear God, what did I do? There. Okay, so yeah, so you see what's going on here. So I have a continuous piece that runs, that runs from the top all the way to the underside lip here. Okay, it goes all the way around nicely and gracefully, and granted, like the way that it's mapped on the sides here, sort of it goes this way. So you might actually want to break these off. Like if you're trying to get this to flow properly, if you made like where the wood ends on this end, or there's a couple different ways to look at this. That could either work, or you could say that this is unnatural. And all you'd have to do is break that seam and get those pieces off, right? So take an edge, take this edge, cut, which gives me a shell of just that piece, right? Move it over, and then rotate it 90 degrees. Like what I was trying to say is, you notice how the wood grain goes this way, right? Well, if I rotate that this direction, move it over, now the wood flows, through it this way, which is a little more realistic and more natural. Whereas if I go back over here, the wood's going up and down, goes through the top nicely, goes up and down there, right? Okay, I think I'll do the same thing over here, right? So grab an edge, cut, UV shell, grab the piece. I'll just put it over here with the other guy. Okay, there. Okay, so this is and I'm just going to ignore actually the bottom doesn't look so bad, and I'm going to ignore this lip under here because who cares? And there we go. So it's it's reasonably decently mapped. If I render this out, and I move my light away, I was trying to make a nice little setup here. There we go. Okay, move my light away. Move it up. Not too bad, that's not so bad. So So, I mean, first and foremost, I'm sure you see like why I like those textures that the noise and all that stuff, because instead of, I mean, would that take me a half an hour just to get this table set up? This is wood. I wanted real wood texture on there. This is what you have to do. It's just, like, it sucks, but it's just how it works, right? But if you can get away with it, if there's a way to procedurally make just about anything, it obviously will save you a load of time, because it, like I said, it's a pain, but so like I said, there's lots of other tools that we'll cover to sort of make this a little bit easier, but this is the nuts and bolts of how this is done, right? And like I said, there are things to make it a little bit easier, but and the tools are better than they used to be, which, if that's any consolation, they used to be way worse, and it was a bigger pain in the butt. And there are some other ways around some of this that we probably won't talk about too much, because it's just important to know this right now, especially with all the people that talked about being interested in games. This is something that a whole lot of things happen with this kind of mapping and stuff in your video games, because as you saw, these textures, these textures tell you just about it, a whole lot of stuff that you want to know about the object. Oops, there they go. There's a dude in here somewhere. So yeah, all these are on the network if you want to play with any of this stuff. Yeah, so this is obviously one of those, and you paint textures to do all kinds of stuff. The same way that we have taken textures, procedural textures, and put them into values in Hypershade, right, to control, like when we were making, putting noise on your bump, or like your specular to kind of rough up the surface or whatever, right? There's nothing stopping you from painting that, right? So you could say, well, this part of the object should be super shiny and this shouldn't, so you paint that part white and you paint the rest of it black, and you get shininess in one area and not in the other. Like, there are almost an unlimited amount of types of maps that you can pump into a surface. Obviously, you could plug a texture map into anything you see here. Literally anything. You could control the subsurface color by painting, and people do this, like I was telling you. It's like when you paint a map for a human head, they paint areas that are less translucent because there's fat deposits, and your nose is, very translucent, and that kind of stuff, right? So people get really nuts with the types of maps that they paint or create, and the basis, the start of the whole thing is getting a good layout here, okay? And like I said, we'll go through some of these other tools that make life a little easier, but this is really the nuts and bolts, and where it comes back to. Another thing to remember, just sort of, well, two things to remember real quick, is that things can also be layered. We haven't talked a whole lot about layers in Hypershade yet, because it gets a little hairy, but a good, you can, there's nothing stopping you from making, like, say you were going to make a big, the big truck, or the sort of like on the back of a rig, right? A delivery truck thing, right? Where, it's metal, and it's mostly this, half shiny kind of crappy metal, but it has a logo on the side of it, right? You don't have to paint that entire texture map, right? If you can get some of it done with procedurals and some of it done with maps, you can layer those kind of things, right? So you could go in and you could make a shader that's, like I said, a couple layers of noise inside of each other to do this and that and the other for the basis of it. Put a layer on that essentially, puts the decal on, and we'll get into that in a layer, and that'll get put on the top, and boom, you're done. Which means, if you wanted that texture to gracefully go all in and out of the nooks and crannies and the folds of this truck model that I don't have, that I'm talking about, you'd have to go through this whole mess, right? Whereas if you use a three-dimensional noise, you don't have to do that. It's because it's you just don't have to do that. It's just a noise, right? Meaning, like, to get that logo on the side of the truck, you could put the truck on it, from the side, do a projection map onto the side of it, and ignore how the nooks and crannies and the folds go on. Make sure it's on a layer. Boom, you're done, right? So you don't have to deal. Depending on the task, you don't have to deal with every last little problem like we did with this table. This table is a pretty good example of something that you really have to handle yourself, because you're trying to gracefully put this texture in and around the object and all that stuff, right? So there's just no two ways around it. I had to do what we just did there, and and it wasn't that bad. And you let it blow it apart, and you essentially sort of puzzle piece it back together and figure out how you want it to work, and you're done, right? And so it's not too bad, right? And like I said, there's tools for this other stuff. So that's an important thing to remember, is that it's not like if you have like I said, this truck model that it's 100,000 polygons, and now you got to worry about making sure every one of those 100,000 polygons are exposed so that you can paint them or whatever. Like in this, you don't, I guess, is kind of the point. You can be smart about it, and you can get some part done procedurally, and some parts not done procedurally. And by procedurally, I mean noises and dots and all those textures that you get for free in Maya. The ones that are generated. Okay. So yeah. So it's lots of times you can get away with it. Lots of times you can get away with not having to do that. I also wanted to show you. So this is, I guess, this is that object that we played with last week, and as somebody or as people immediately found out, is that it wasn't set up to be mapped very well, right? So I went in and I redid it, right? So since I made this out of a sphere, the top part worked well, but it had stretchy stuff in through here because I just sort of stretched some parts out of it, and then I made this base, right? So all this was all just utter crap, right? So what I had to do is I went in and I grabbed all these pieces and started mapping them separately. This is pretty much a sphere, so I did that, but I moved the center out so that it could be mapped straight on. This is probably the base. This I did as a cylindrical map. Same here. I didn't worry about the inside too much, and that's why it's all smushed up in there. And then this is just the main body, right? So when I went back and I did this, now it behaves reasonably decently. And this is something I should have done before I handed it out, but if I drag, object mode, object mode, there we go. Now it maps fairly well, so because I went in and redid it because it looked like crap, because I didn't pay it any mind. I started out with a sphere and just whipped the rest of it together, and that's why we had all that. If you remember, if you guys tried any of this, I'm sure you saw all kinds of crazy stretching and all this stuff in the bottom that because all I did is I made the base out of the polygons that were at the bottom here. So essentially that part of the map had to do all of this, because it was just essentially stretched and pulled out of this, and it just looked like nothing, right? So anyway, so yeah, so that's sort of an intro to UV mapping. Hopefully it's not too scary. Like I said, I mean, I don't care for it, but it is what it is, and it's just how a lot of stuff's done. The good news is that hopefully, if you stay in this field, people are working around it. There's a new thing called PTEX, which basically makes a mini map for almost every single face. It allows you just to have an object and you just paint on it. Not everybody's using that. In fact, a lot of people aren't using that yet. So it's not something I can just say, this is what we're going to do. We have to learn the hard way before you can do the easy way, I guess is the best way to say it. So there is hope, I guess, is what you could say. And I mean, when a texture works well, it's worth it, because it's like, as nice as procedural textures can be, nothing beats real photos and real objects, like this texture, you could never procedurally make something this random and this nice, this nice, it's not going to happen. So Sometimes you need a real photo, and a lot of your best stuff. If you go out and you look at other people's work, a lot of great work you'll see is just really, really nicely applied texture maps. Somebody who really knows what they're doing, and I mean, they know what they're doing, their lighting and their modeling, but if you really look, lots of times it's just really, really, really nice texture maps applied very, very nicely and used in really smart ways. So that's about it. I mean, I would, I would kick them around a little bit if you have any of your other objects, but there is a lot more to play with. So I wouldn't blame you if you didn't, but this allows you to, all the times that I was like, don't worry about that. This is what we were sort of alluding to, the ability to put your own textures on stuff and all that jazz. So this is what we're talking about. So it's something we have to go through and deal with, but you get a lot out of it. So there's Wednesday we'll continue talking about this stuff. If you have any questions about what the assignment that we were doing last week, and if you need to finish it up, please help yourself. I'll still be around. But that's about it. Thank you very much. Is that my sign out, New? Is that what I say?
It's, thanks for listening.
Okay, thanks for
See you
listening.
next week.
Thanks for listening. See you next week.